Allen Lund Company looks forward to seeing you at Matt's in March.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
Imagine if you got paid for all the overtime hours you put in. If a newly reintroduced bill has its way, that's exactly what will happen. Scott Thompson sits down with Mark Schirmer of Landline Magazine to discuss the Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers, or Got Truckers Act. Freight fraud was the main topic of discussion during a recent trip by OOIDA Executive Vice President Pugh to Washington, D.C. Ashley Blackford speaks with Lewie about his time in the Capitol and finds out what he shared with the new administration. For some months now, truckers have watched the back and forth on whether businesses will have to report beneficial ownership information. For now, at least, the problem seems to be resolved. I'll discuss that and more with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. And finally, for many years, truckers have been advised to invest in a dash cam. But some carriers have also moved toward the use of inward-facing cameras. And Marty Ellis says they can create problems. I'll talk with the man who drives the spirit of the American trucker. And now, here's Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Imagine, if you will, a world in which you get paid for all of the overtime hours you put in. If a newly reintroduced bill has its way, that's exactly what will happen for company employee drivers. The Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers, or Got Truckers Act, is back, and so is Mark Schirmer of Landline Magazine, who's going to help us understand what the bill is all about. Mark, great to see you as always.
Yeah, glad to be here, Scott.
This is the second time the Got Truckers Act has been introduced in Congress. The first time was the fall of 2023. There are going to be folks out there who maybe didn't catch it that time around. Understandably, they got stuff going on. Let's start with exactly what this bill aims to do. I know that's a loaded question. There's a lot in there.
Sure. To make it as simple as possible, so the Fair Labor Standards Act, all the way back in 1938, basically exempted motor carriers from having to pay overtime wages to truck drivers. The thought process at the time was that would actually discourage truck drivers from wanting to work an abundance of hours. And, probably before like the hours of service requirements, that's just a way you didn't want truck drivers out there 70, 80 hours just so that they could, get a lot of overtime pay. But the reality as we move forward here to 2025 is that truckers are working those amount of hours and they're not being compensated fairly for it. And that's what this bill plans to do. It basically would remove that exemption and update that, the Standards Act to no longer exempt motor carriers from having to pay truck drivers overtime.
Yeah, a few things have changed since 1938, this being one of them for sure. This has the support of OOIDA for a number of reasons. Part of it is this belief that passing the Got Truckers Act would kind of have ripple effects throughout the industry. We, of course, as you talked about there, are talking about company drivers, employee drivers in this respect. However, the ripple effects from this passing are maybe not talked about enough, I think, which there are quite a few of them.
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts with valuing all of a truck driver's time. And if you do that for company drivers, that should also pay dividends for owner-operators as far as, being able to negotiate your rates and all of that. I think if you start there and you change kind of the landscape where instead of drivers being paid by the mile, and only paid if those wheels are turning, I think it can have beneficial safety ramifications. And I think it also can be beneficial to just, drivers sometimes, if there's bad weather or if there's just some things that they need to stop, that doesn't mean that they're not working and they're still not in charge of that freight and working for the carrier or whoever it is. So all of those things, I think, deserve to be compensated.
And it makes sense that we would see more efficiency within the supply chain as well,
Yeah.
which would make things a lot smoother at shippers and receivers. It doesn't take a giant leap to come to that conclusion as well, right? If they're honoring everybody's time, they're going to try to get people in and out.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it makes total sense, and it is funny when you hear from ATA or the people arguing like this is some sort of complicated thing or this would change things so much. Every other a worker they have or are compensated based off of time. There doesn't appear that it would be that difficult to do that for truck drivers. And like I said, I think overtime is a great place to start. And we also know that President Trump has said and kind of made the pledge and pitch to not tax overtime wages. And that makes this bill even all the more important because right now, that wouldn't apply to truck drivers, but they'd be able to get this tax break if this comes to fruition, if the bill also goes through and they start getting overtime wages.
And there's also this push, right, to restore the per diem tax deduction for employee truck drivers as well. That kind of folds into what we're talking about as well.
Yeah, and I think there's so many things where we got to look at company drivers and protections, and these are two kind of key efforts I think that would really make it, and maybe help reduce that turnover problem that we see with company drivers so frequently as well. So we talked about the overtime guarantee, but then also on per diem, owner-operators right now are able to deduct off of their taxes about 80% of, for meal expenses and things while they're on the road. Before the tax cut of 2017, employee drivers were also able to do that. They lost that in that time. I think it was kind of an unintended consequence of the bill that I don't think they really understood of how that would apply to truck drivers. But that's all the way back in 2017, and we need to get that fixed. I've talked to, and I think you have as well, OOIDA member Stu Hochfelder, who told me that it's changed about $20,000 per year that he's no longer able to write off on his taxes. That is a considerable hit on anybody's bank account.
Absolutely. Let's take a step back real quick to talk about the Gut Truckers Act again here. It's bipartisan. It's in both the House and the Senate, which helps its chances. Again, this is the second time it's been introduced, though. Looking back to where we were before, how far did the bill get last time, and what are we looking at now?
It didn't get a whole lot. You had 3 co-sponsors in the House, and you had 5 in the Senate. Again, there's some positives there because it is bipartisan. But the other positive that I'll give off here is this is highway bill time. And when this is a good opportunity that could be packaged into a larger highway bill. And the fact that we have support from Republicans and Democrats really helps the chances of something getting packaged into a larger bill.
Mark just finished a story on this very topic, one you can check out at landline.media, something I'd encourage everyone to do when they have the time. Thank you for your time. Mr. Schrimmer, we'll see you again soon.
All right. Thank you, Scott.
Mark Reddick, back to you.
Thanks, Scott. For years, many truckers have struggled with a growing problem, freight fraud, and it can easily cost a trucker their entire business. Now, Congress is ready to do something. That's in the form of 2 bills, S. 337 and H.R. 880, both of which would give FMCSA the authority to go after people committing fraud. Contact your lawmakers at 202-224-3121 or go to fightingfortruckers.com. Next, Ashley Blackford talks with OOIDA's Lewie Pugh about what he told federal officials regarding freight fraud. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Protect your diesel engine with Howe's Diesel Defender. Restore vital lubricity, eliminate injector deposits, and boost fuel economy by 5% or more. Power, performance, protection, all in one. Howe's Diesel Defender, available now.
Firestone's FD694 drive tire for long haul and regional applications now delivers 126,000 more removal miles than the Yokohama TY517 MC2. Contact your Firestone commercial dealer to learn more.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Landline Now, welcome back. OOIDA's Executive Vice President Lewie Pugh joins me now. Lewie, how are things going?
Hey, they're going fantastic. How are they going with you?
They're going pretty well, although I don't think I've been as busy as you have been.
Yeah.
Last week you were in D.C. Talk to me about what you were doing there.
Oh, went down to D.C. to try to educate some people on Capitol Hill and maybe over at FMCSA on what the real plight of truckers are and the importance of trucking and the issues that truckers are facing right now. And then got a little hearing dumped on our lap that we did while we were there. That was sort of a last-minute thing on the Senate Commerce Committee, but and met a lot of new lawmakers. We had some overturn in Washington, D.C., which is a good thing a lot of times to have a little overturn down there. And so got some new people kind of educated about OOIDA and about OOIDA's members and, again, the issues and the importance of it. And mainly I spent a lot of time telling everybody that, truckers are a big voting bloc. They help get a lot of you here. It's about time you listen to them and do something for them because you've been kicking things like the parking bill and broker transparency and some of these other things down the line for years now. And it's time for that to stop. It's time to start, having some accountability and taking care of the people who take care of us here in America.
Now, with the new administration, of course, like you said, lots of new faces. What was the feel you got as far as their understanding of trucking issues? Well,
I mean, fortunately, the old hands that are still there, like Representative Bost and Representative Nels and some of them, and Representative Larson that I met with, of course, they know the issues, understand the issues, and just sort of a recap and retalk and reconnect and when things are coming out. The parking bill dropped when I was there last week, so that's good from Congressman Bost. The new people, it was good. They had a good attitude, I think. I hope it continues. They've heard their voters, and this is on both sides of the aisle. We're a bipartisan organization, so from both sides of the aisle, the new people were very interested to learn. A lot of them were amazed that we have this bathroom issue. Even some were amazed on a parking issue and pay and just, a lot of things. We got into that stuff, but the new people coming that they understand that all this partisan politics stuff is not helping anyone and that they need to come to the middle and we need to work together. And, they hear their voters because their voters and their people out here in the world or outside the Beltway are really suffering. They have been suffering. Washington hasn't been listening to them for a long, long time. And so my hope is, though, that they don't get poisoned by the water in the well, because that seems to happen a lot of times. People go with the best intentions, and then I don't know whether they drink the water or what happens, but they kind of forget where they came from. So let's hope that's not happening. Let's hope, we got some change. But again, I can't say enough. This is people on both sides. And that's, it's hard not to get wrapped up in all this craziness, but I can't say this enough. We as truckers, we as the trucking industry, and we as the American people, we need to focus on the common problems and common issues we have and stop all this focusing on what's dividing us and because it's doing nothing but tearing each other apart. And personally, I think some politicians kind of like that because they can kind of do what they want while we're all fighting with one another. So anyway.
Now, you also met with some reporters, right?
Yeah, I did. I talked to some reporters there as well. Some really good reporters. Nothing like the reporters of Landline and Landline Now, but, so some strong second runners.
Yes. What were some of the questions that they had for you?
Mainly interested on kind of what we're seeing on the whole freight fraud issue and that kind of stuff, where we think broker transparency is going to go, where we think the speed limiters are going to go, what kind of bills, what are we going to start pushing in the highway bill, stuff like that.
Now, you mentioned the hearing. You gave testimony during a Senate subcommittee meeting, which I thought had a great name, by the way, Grand Theft Cargo. I thought that was very clever. Talk to me about what that was.
Yeah, it was pretty much what it said. It was a hearing about the cargo freight and freight fraud that we see out there and freight theft, but a little bit of both. There was myself, the chief head cop. I apologize for what his title, but from BNSF Railroad, the top cop at BNSF Railroad. There was a gentleman there from the Academy Sports, the sporting goods retailer. There was a gentleman there who has a trucking company and a brokerage office in Texas, and then there was myself. But with that, they were there. We were all singing from the same hymnal. It really wasn't a very long hearing, as hearings go. It was pretty short because there really wasn't a lot of controversy there wasn't really any amongst us, because we kind of all agreed on what needs to be done and how things need to be handled. But just mainly familiarizing the Senate with what's going on, because as you know, we've seen these people robbing rail cars, and we know what's going on with trucking, where people are posing as brokers or posing as carriers. They're stealing identities. They're getting carriers to haul loads and then have them deliver them to a fictitious, or not, I guess it's a real place, but it's not the right place. And then they're stealing the cargo, or they're stealing a carrier's identity, going and getting a load and stealing the cargo. So all these different kind of things, and talked about that. Talked about, unfortunately, how the feds, being FMCSA, DOJ, and others, have sort of not really done anything on this, and they need to. There was discussion on whether they need more funding, whether they need this. I mean, my attitude at this point is we need to figure out what we're on, kind of stamp back and look. I don't know that they need more funding, but probably they need to move for some funding to a different area. I mean, the frustration for us, and I brought this up, is the FMCSA came out late last year sometime and said that they can't find a coalition to safety from theft, or how that. And of course, if it's not a safety problem, it's not their issue. But we know it does cause a safety. It's, personal safety, plus it take you out of business. It can make people where they can't afford to fix their trucks and stuff like that. So there's definitely a safety component to this, whether they want to admit that or not. Other thing we talked about was, of course, the National Consumer Complaint Database, and how the name probably should be changed. A lot of truckers don't even know that it exists. I mean, hell, I didn't know it existed until I started working here. I drove truck for 20 of them years. I didn't know there was anything like that. So we kind of talked about that. And also how that not only should they probably do that, but probably somebody should be monitoring and coming back, because as I look at it, it's kind of where all complaints go to die, is what it seems like. People send in the complaints and that's it.
Mm. Yeah, I thought the other gentleman that spoke during the hearing, they all came from like a good place as far as examples. I know one guy that you mentioned talked about being a victim of fraud, so I thought that was interesting. What was the main message that you wanted to get across?
The main message I want to get across is that, truckers are losing their business, and this has happened. This is like become the perfect crime, because nobody seems to understand it. Nobody's enforcing anything to it, and trucking, and it's happening so often. I mean, I said at my testimony, probably while we're sitting here doing this, somebody's getting frauded right now. It's kind of like cybersecurity and that stuff. It's just running rampant in the industry. So, lawmakers, hopefully the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration will start doing the right thing. But if not, lawmakers need to make them do the right thing, and get whether the FMCSA, and I don't mean to pick on FMCSA, but they're on the front line of this. They know who's registered carriers. They know who's not registered carriers. And the other important thing we talked about was the importance of passing, Fisher-Duckworth bill, because there is that Household Movers Guide Act or something. The name slips me, Paul. But anyway, and I know people get confused. Well, why we care because of household? But there is a part of that bill that brokers have to register with a physical address, and that was my point in my testimony when I was talking. Every one of these cases that we find at OOIDA, they're using just a generic mailbox. We've seen where 8 different companies are using the same mailbox. So that's the first thing. Have a physical address, so they're real. They're in the United States, because we don't even know they're. And then the second thing, it would actually give FMCSA some strength back where they could actually go after these people and actually give them civil fines, which that was taken away. So that's another problem FMCSA has. They're really not allowed to do things. So that was the point of my testimony. This is happening. This problem is only getting worse. Nobody's doing anything about it. You have a bill you can pass to help with it. That would be a big help. And you can also look at these other things and get started. But somebody needs to do something.
Now, of course, you're there to be the voice for OOIDA and educate people from the owner-operator's perspective. But I'm curious, what do you take away when you do these hearings and when you go to D.C.?
Depends on the hearing. I mean, I took away from this one, it was a little frustrating that there wasn't more senators on the committee that showed up, which is always frustrating. But on the flip side, I was happy with this because everybody spoke, like all of us kind of sung from the same hymnal and everybody had good examples. I do feel encouraged that there is concern on the Senate level about this and that they're understanding that this is costing the consumer and truckers and rail and everybody in transportation lots and lots of money and something needs done. Sometimes and I was also very happy that nobody on the large lawmakers, which usually the Senate's a lot more calmer, but nobody just went on a crazy tirade that wasn't necessary because that happens sometimes. But again, the Senate usually a little more calmer. But yeah, so I mean, I left with a good feeling. A lot going on in D.C. It was a very short hearing, but as we talked about it last week and reminded somebody else said, this was one subject. Usually these hearings we talk about a lot. This was one subject, and when everybody's pretty much singing from the same hymnal, we all agree what the problem is, and that should be, if nothing else, a bell ringing moment for the Senate. Is everybody involved saying the same thing? So it's not like you're getting four different opinions, that we're all saying the same thing in the end and what needs done the same way.
Yeah, same thing from different perspectives.
Yes.
What were some of the solutions? I know a few people mentioned, some things that should be done. What were some of the solutions?
Yeah, again, some of the solutions we talked about was, of course, FMCSA monitoring the NCCDB better, getting this Duckworth bill passed, the importance of the physical address. Those were some things as far as trucking that was looked at and asked about. Some of those I brought up. Also the fact is, FMCSA, and I know they're working hard to do this, but, they've got to get this new registration system put up. And, the other suggestion or thing that I brought up, I don't think anybody else really did, but probably more so I understand and know this more than others, is the fact is we need to make the barrier of entry into transportation as far as trucking or intermediary, make it much harder, make it much difficult. It's too easy. We're giving out these things like candy.
Where do we go from here?
Well, call your lawmaker. I know I say this all the time. It's never too soon to have a good relationship with your lawmakers. But right now, the biggest thing is to call your lawmaker and tell them to support the Fisher-Duckworth bill, this household movers. You can find out at fightingfortruckers.com. You can actually go to fightingfortruckers.com and send your lawmaker a message right there. But that would be the first and foremost thing, as always. And, while you got them on the phone, you're talking, tell them about any other issues you have. I mean, again, I say this till I'm blue in the face, and I know people get tired of hearing it, but at the end of the way, they don't know nothing about what's really going on. They may think they do, but they don't. And the only way they know is if you tell them. And I can guarantee you there's people down there in their ear right now telling them things against you. So you need to be telling them what's for you.
Good advice. Lewie, thank you so much.
Thank you. Always a pleasure. And be safe out there, truckers. Thanks for what you do.
That was OOIDA's Executive Vice President, Lewie Pugh. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. Stay tuned for more after this.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a cat scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget misaccuracy when you're truck on a cat scale.
Penske is the trusted source for quality used trucks. Whether you search our website, call our sales staff, or bid at our online auction, you are sure to find the right used truck for your business. Visit PenskeUsedTrucks.com to view our inventory and learn more.
For some months now, truckers and other small business owners have struggled as the federal government goes back and forth on whether those businesses will have to report beneficial ownership information. Well, for now at least, the problem seems to be resolved. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Rettig. I'm joined as always by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, how are you doing?
Doing well, Mark. Good to be with you.
Good to have you here. Let's kind of start off with some of the basics. I know that most people we think should be familiar with this by now, but I always go with the people are born every day who don't know this stuff. Can you start by just explaining what is beneficial ownership information and where did the whole concept come from?
So this beneficial ownership information reporting is basically applies to any business, especially with ones with 20 or fewer employees to report basic information, address, name, other details to the Treasury Department. The intent of this was to address fraud and corruption of businesses, potentially foreign businesses, using smaller shell companies as a way to conduct illegal activity. And all of this stems from legislation that was enacted a few years ago by Congress called the Corporate Transparency Act. Attempted to combat criminal and terrorist organizations by going after those shell companies that they rely on to conduct illegal business. It seems to me that somewhere along the way, it kind of missed the forest for the trees in looking at all these small businesses who, especially for the trucking industry, are already submitting this information to the Department of Transportation, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and that the burden of these reporting requirements is unfairly falling on legitimate small businesses. A lot of times, just individuals who are trying to make their way and have no connection to any large scale terrorist activity in any way. But as part of this legislation, and we hope that it's not going to be the case moving forward, we're going to have to go in, submit that basic personal information once again, and take the time, take the hassle to do that. But we really have, I think, and this has been, again, a long back and forth, different legal rulings, different regulatory rulings. But now the Department of Treasury, I think, has made their most substantive and significant statements, kind of rolling back these requirements on small businesses. And we got some official statements from the Department of Treasury, from President Trump. Over the weekend, the department announced that it will not enforce any penalties or fines associated with beneficial ownership information reporting under the existing regulatory deadlines, which the latest were going to be March 21st. So some very positive developments coming out from the new administration and from the Treasury Department. And it kind of based on what they stated here, it does not sound like these are going to come back anytime soon, but it is going to take some interim rulemaking that we're still waiting on to be released to kind of clear up a lot of what's going to be happening moving forward.
Ending this whole thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that was something that OOIDA had been supportive of. What were the association's chief concerns with this reporting requirement?
Yeah, really, again, the duplicative burdens falling on small businesses, that going to another government department, putting in their basic ownership information when they've already done that in terms of getting their motor carrier authority, registering with FMCSA. They do it on their yearly taxes with the IRS and the Treasury Department as well. So again, just more red tape, more time, taking away from their ability to operate their businesses and be on the roads. And we didn't really think it was accomplishing anything in terms of cracking down on potential fraud or improving safety in any way. So this was, again, kind of an unnecessary regulatory burden that would be, again, mostly falling on small businesses. A lot of large corporations, large trucking businesses, big businesses were exempt from some of these from the beneficial ownership information reporting requirements in the legislation. So kind of unfairly going after individuals here who, again, make up the overwhelming majority of trucking businesses in the country.
Well, and especially for small businesses, no one needs more paperwork to do.
Exactly. And I think in these latest statements that was made crystal clear by the new leadership at the Department of Treasury.
There were a lot of court cases over this in different states and different courts. Does it appear that this action will make those various court cases go away or at least make them moot?
I think that's the hope, and we thought that might take place a little sooner once the administration came into the office on January 20th. But even after January 20th, the Department of Treasury was still defending some of the ongoing legal battles that are, really unfolding in various venues in different courts across the country. And that had created a little bit more confusion as these courts and even the Supreme Court made different rulings. And it seemed that we were back on track for these reporting requirements to be in effect beginning later this month. But in light of the latest action, that is no longer going to be the case. And now we're going to be waiting on this kind of interim rulemaking, which I think is going to provide some more specific details about the future of these beneficial ownership information requirements. But when you kind of look at the statements from President Trump even, he stated that furthermore, Treasury is now finalizing an emergency regulation to formally suspend the rule for American businesses. The economic menace of BOI reporting will soon be no more. So kind of, looking at that interpretation, I think that's some optimistic thoughts from the president that when this interim rule comes out, it's really going to be helpful for small businesses. But again, that has not been released yet. The Treasury has indicated it will be out before March 21st. So that should be the next step. And kind of based on what's in there, I think that's going to kind of give more direction to some of the legal challenges that still technically are ongoing right now.
Well, let's go to another topic here. There's a lot going on. 8 years ago, an act of Congress all but wiped out a major tax deduction for company drivers in trucking, and now OOIDA is asking federal lawmakers to fix that problem. Now, this, as I said, goes back to a law passed in 2017. Can you kind of describe what that was, Jay?
Yeah, so in 2017, this was a major congressional and, at the time, Trump administration effort to implement major tax cuts in a number of different areas, tax reform bill. This was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. But one of kind of the unintended consequences of that legislation was that it eliminated the ability of employee drivers to deduct 80% of the per diem rate in daily expenses for meals while they were on the road. Now, that legislation did preserve the standard per diem deduction for owner-operators or those leased to large motor carriers, but truckers classified as company drivers lost that benefit, which since that legislation was enacted, we've heard from quite a few employee drivers and company drivers stating that it's really hurt their bottom line. It really caused some confusion and unexpected tax hikes after that bill was enacted. Those tax cuts are coming to the end of their initial life this year. Congress is working on potentially extending those and doing a whole number of other reforms through a legislative process known as reconciliation, and those actions have begun in both the House and Senate. And we have sent letters to critical committees, both in the Senate and House side this week, really emphasizing the need to restore this per diem deduction for employee drivers as some of these tax tax cuts, tax bills kind of get either extended, modified, or amended during the legislative process this year.
I was doing some math, and this is just a enormous deduction for anyone who can take it in trucking. I looked at, like, if you spend 250 nights away from home, which is not unusual for someone in long-haul trucking, you're talking anywhere from $16,000 to, I remember one trucker saying $20,000 in deductions. And, of course, it could be more if you spend more days away. It's surprising in a tax cut bill that this would have happened. Was this a deliberate action to take it away, or was it just one of those things that was an oversight that they didn't catch?
Yeah, I think probably a little bit of both. I don't think they at the time understood a lot of how useful these deductions were for employee drivers on the road. And I think Congress thought that the tax breaks that were given to some of these corporate entities, including large trucking businesses, could make up for those losses. But that doesn't seem to have been the case since 2017. So I think certainly this is going to be an opportunity to correct, that oversight or what was not achieved in the broader tax reform. So, yeah, you mentioned, it could be upwards of tens of $1,000s per year, which for truck drivers is obviously going to make a critical difference at the end of their year as part of some of their when they're filing taxes, and can just really make a huge difference. And especially when you look at low wages and difficult working conditions have resulted in excessive driver turnover within the trucking industry. When you look at some of these large carriers who rely on employee drivers, that they have turnover rates sometimes exceeding 100%, which is really mind-boggling. So this, I think, relatively kind of common sense fix could go a long way, not only into improving those driver retention rates, but really helping out a lot of individual company drivers in terms of making ends meet, allowing them to stay in the industry. And as we know, more experience, more time spent behind the wheel is going to improve safety overall. So in this letter, really encouraging lawmakers to not only return this per diem deduction for employee drivers, but also preserving the per diem benefit, which has been in place for owner-operators as well. So this is really a critical time. If you've experienced hardship by losing this per diem deduction, encourage you to contact your lawmakers through fightingfortruckers.com.
Okay. We just have maybe 30 seconds left, Jay. What does it look like in Congress in terms of support for this, and especially on the Ways and Means Committee where OOIDA sent their letter?
So this is an issue we've tried to address through other legislation since that initial tax bill was passed. And in some versions of the legislation, there was a Tax Fairness for Workers Act introduced last Congress in the House and Senate. The House version had over 200 co-sponsors. The Senate version had 40. So I think there is some support for this already. So I think it's going to be critical to get it over the hump, and this is going to be a large effort. The reconciliation process, it can be quite formidable, and considering the small margins on both sides, it's really going to be huge to get every member of Congress on board here.
Okay. Well, Jay, thank you very much for all the information. We sure appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've been talking with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
At Truck Stop, we've built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
Capital Reman, the leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, has partnered with OOIDA to offer exclusive member benefits. Visit capitalreman.com today to support America's transportation industry and take advantage of your benefits.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now. Welcome back. Every week, we check in with Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the spirit of the American trucker. For many years, truckers have been advised to invest in a dash cam, and many now use them. But at the same time, some carriers have moved toward the use of inward-facing cameras, and those devices can create problems, even in those cases where the trucker has done nothing wrong. Marty regaled us with one example.
Carolina west to Denver, up to Bangor, west to Austin, coast to coast, sea to sea, sail on, sail on.
Well, Marty, how are you doing?
I am lovely, Mark, and you?
Fantastic. Doing great up here. Where are you at right now?
I'm at the TA in Vero Beach, Florida.
Oh, okay. Already made it over to Vero Beach. That's fantastic. Now, as I recall, that's a pretty good size truck stop, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It has 162 parking spots, so it's not huge, but it's a decent size. It's I-95, exit 147 will be here through the 10th, and it has 9 showers, a Country Pride restaurant, and a Subway and a Popeyes.
Okay, so a little bit of variety there and a nice sit-down place included.
Right, absolutely.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some of the issues that are coming up with truckers right now. And one of them that you brought up involves lawsuits and cameras. What is it that has people's attention on that subject?
Yeah, I had one of our members stop in, and, more and more people are watching some of the videos on YouTube and, social media and that. And he told me about this one. It was basically a deposition of a truck driver. And so, I was very curious about it, seeing it myself. So I went and watched it. And I wasn't really impressed with the driver's demeanor. I think he was, kind of in that mode that I'm not supposed to say much. But he was, in my mind, trying to act like a lawyer when he's not one. But what really rang true to the member and myself after watching it was they relied on the inward-facing cameras a lot. And I was so surprised on how they basically picked it apart. The prosecuting attorney picked it apart as in, okay, where were your eyes, pointed right there in this part of the video? Were you tired? Were you blinking? Were you, were you drinking an energy drink so you were tired? They were just, I guess, we talk about the outward facing cameras. The majority of the time will save you. But boy, the inside facing cameras, which, he had both. And so I couldn't believe how the lawyers, and I should know better, how the lawyers were, almost going frame by frame. And, okay, you were looking over here, and the driver's trying to explain maybe what he was looking at. But this is 2 years after the whole incident happened, and it's like, man, I cannot remember what I did yesterday, let alone, a couple of years ago. So I think it'd be a big challenge. And I'm wondering if the big companies that are putting all these inward-facing ones, if they've ever looked at something like this and maybe rethought what they were doing.
Yeah, and I think you've got a good point there. Anything you do can be picked apart by another lawyer. Anything you do. They can get down to minutia. And, of course, you're looking at different things all the time, even when you're paying attention to what's on the road, because you have to watch your speedometer. You have to watch these other gauges. You've got to be on the lookout for something else that could go wrong because you are driving a massive machine. But I also hate it whenever, you blink for a second because people blink and they shoot right to the, oh, you must have been tired.
Right.
And especially, I remember when Minnesota had their little checklist they were doing, and they said that they considered it a sign of fatigue if you had a caffeinated beverage, like you said, an energy drink. Isn't that a sign that you've counteracted that? I don't know anybody that takes an energy drink and then feels tired.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, I was just kind of shocked, and I mean, just how intricate that they can get, and thinking to myself, well, I'm, constantly looking at mirrors, I'm looking at gauges, and I mean, heaven forbid you yawn. I mean, during any part of that, holy buckets, I think it'd probably take you out and hang you alongside the highway. I'm not quite sure, but that's sure how it was, sounding. And it's like, gosh, somehow they have to understand, we do this for a living, and we will be doing other things other than, hands at, 10 and 2 and eyes facing forward 100% of the time. You're driving for hours. You're gonna, be moving your eyes around and your head around. You're gonna, do some weird stuff, I suppose. I mean, just think if somebody was filming what you're doing in your office all the time, Mark. Could they come in and say, "Hey, Mark, I saw you yawn at 3 p.m. Could this be affecting your job?"
Well, or I saw you click on this. I saw you click on that, because I do work on a computer quite a bit, and I'm sure somebody could try and pick that apart.
Right.
It goes back to the advice I've heard many, many times, which is when you're in court, you answer the question as briefly as possible, and you do not volunteer information, because anything you volunteer can and will be used against you. If you can answer a question yes or no, do it.
Right.
But keep it simple and keep it short, and don't give them ammunition.
I agree with that. Yep.
Yeah, it's terrible that it's that way, but this is the world we live in. We got a couple of minutes left here, Marty, and I was curious. You mentioned also something about curtains on the side window. What is the issue there?
Yeah, I'm getting more and more comments, and I've seen it out here myself out on the road, is that there's a lot of people that are driving around with their curtains that you would normally put around your windows when you stop and take a break and get back in your sleeper, almost pulled up to where you can hardly maybe see your mirror and nothing else. And whenever I see that, and I've had a lot of our members, complain about it and, think about the safety aspect of that. And they're thinking, what I'm thinking is like, okay, what are these guys doing in the cab that they don't want anybody else to see? And so that is, a questionable practice on some drivers' spots. One of our members also mentioned, you can get a ticket for tint on the side of your windows, but not for a curtain being, probably 3/4 or more closed along your side window. I'd much rather have a tinted window than a curtain. But yeah, it was one of those things that got brought up, and I cannot imagine that a police would go by and not pull that driver over and say, okay, what's going on?
Yeah, you don't want to take that chance, and they don't like when they can't see in, so.
Right.
Well, Marty, we've run out of time here again. I know there's a lot more we could talk about this, and I always enjoy it, but why don't you just let us know real quick where you're going next?
We'll be going up to the TA Express for the 12th and 13th in Statesboro, Georgia. I believe that's my first time I'll be in there. And then the 15th and 16th will be at the TA in Antioch, Tennessee.
Okie doke, sounds good. Any final words?
Just be kind to one another and give that driver next to you a break.
Brothers of the highway, children of the wind.
Once again, that was Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker. You can find Marty's next stop on our show and every day at our website, landlinenow.com. That's our program for today. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.